Hello, and welcome to today's lesson on Standard 2.1a. We're going to be covering all the topics that are listed under that standard, and then all of the questions that are in the Study Island lesson, Parent Graphs and Transformations in Algebra 2. So I'm so glad that you could join us today, and remember our study tips as always. You can pause and rewind this if you need to. Make sure that you're taking notes so you have those to refer back to as we're working problems. And remember, you can always pause at the beginning of a question, you think about what you think the answer is, and then watch how the problem is solved, and that way you can gauge how it is that you are doing and if you need more practice or not. First, we need to understand what a parent graph is. So a parent graph is the most basic graph, and then we have different translations, so different ways of moving them, so that they might go up, down, they might stretch, they might shrink, and whatnot. So for these questions in Study Island, there are 4 basic parent functions we need to know. The first one is a quadratic, so y equals x squared, and that's a u, where the bottom of the u is at 0, 0, the vertex. The cubic is kind of like a snake, y equals x cubed, and it's going up, and then it kind of levels out at the origin 0, 0, and then keeps going up. And then we have an exponential, where you have y equals some number raised to the x power, and it starts out almost horizontal and getting gradually, and then it starts increasing at a very rapid rate. And then you have the logarithmic function, where it starts out vertical and then it turns and starts to go horizontal. But like I said, once we have our parent graphs, all the other graphs in that family of functions are just have transformations done to them. And the main there's different types of transformations, but the main one we're looking at today is a translation, which is just sliding or shifting of the parent graph up, down, left, and or right. So if in the equation you have in parentheses, you have an x, and then you have some number being added to it, that means that parent function is going to be shifted to the left, so the direction of the arrow here. If you have an x in parentheses, and in that parentheses you have it being subtracted by some number, it's going to be shifted to the right, so the direction of this arrow, which these two are kind of backwards from what you would necessarily think of when you're thinking of a number line. However, if you have x plus a number outside of the parentheses, then that's going to shift the parent graph up. And then if you have x minus a number outside of the parentheses, that's going to shift the parent function down. And you could have a combination of these. So you could have, an addition in the parentheses and a subtraction out of the parentheses, and it should be shifted to the left and down. All right, so once you go ahead and get these notes taken down, feel free to pause if you need to, and we'll go ahead and look at some examples. So in this example here, it wants to know which of the following is the parent graph of the graph above. So this isn't a parent graph, it's in a family of one of those 4 functions that we looked at the beginning: quadratic, cubic, logarithmic, or exponential, and we have to decide which one of those is it most like. So if you notice, it starts out vertical, and then, or almost vertical, and then turns and goes horizontal. The graph that has that shape was the logarithmic graph. So our answer here is D. This graph is asking the same question. Here it's a U, and the graph that had a U shape at the beginning was the quadratic graph, which is x squared. So that means our answer here is going to be D. This graph here, it wants to know which one of this graph is its shape closest to: quadratic, cubic, exponential, or logarithmic. This one is a snake, It increases, levels out for a little bit, and then increases again, and that's the shape of the cubic graph. This is just shifted up and over. So the cubic graph is x cubed, which is letter A. Okay, this graph here, it's asking which of the following is the parent graph of the graph above. And so once again, it's asking which one of those quadratic, cubic, logarithmic, or exponential, which one of those graphs is this graph here? Is its shape most alike? Well, it's starting out almost horizontal, and then it turns and goes vertical. And that shape is closest to D, an exponential, which is any number raised to the x power. So my answer here is D. Right here, we're starting out with this parent graph, and the question is asking us what are the actual shifts that are happening when we add a -7 inside of the parentheses and a -2 outside of the parentheses. So we need to remember back to those notes that we took about translations and about how numbers inside and outside of the parentheses will shift the parent graph. So here we have a -7 inside of the parentheses, so that's going to be a shift to the right, and it's going to shift to the right 7 units. And then a -2 outside of the parentheses is going to be a shift down, and it's going to shift down 2 units, and the answer choice that tells us that is B. Same thing here is, so we're going to look inside of the parentheses, we have a +3. So that's going to mean that it's going to shift to the left 3 units. And then outside of the parentheses, we have a -8. So that's going to shift down 8 units. And the answer choice that tells us that is letter A. So this example is similar, but now our parent graph is an exponential function. And it wants to know which statement correctly describes the graph when you add a +4 in parentheses and a -5 outside of the parentheses. So a +4 inside the parentheses with x, that's going to shift the graph to the left 4, and a -5 outside is going to shift the graph down 5, and the answer choice that reads that is letter B. Okay, this question here, they're adding a -6 inside of the parentheses with x, so that means I'm going to shift 6 units to the right, and then they're adding a +3 outside of the parentheses, so that means I'm going to shift the parent graph up 3, and the answer choice that describes that is letter A. Right, this question, they're wording it a little bit differently, but it's still the same idea. They're telling us we're starting with this x cubic function, and it wants to know what is my new equation going to be when I shift it 6 units to the left. Well, when I'm going left and right, that means it's a number inside of the parentheses with x, and that means when I go left, that means I'm going to have a plus a number inside of the parentheses. And here, since it's 6 units I'm shifting left, it's going to be x + 6 raised to the cubic power, since we started with a cubic function. So that makes my answer choice here letter D. This question here, we're starting with an x cubic function, and then we're adding on a +9. So what wants to know is when you add on a +9 with no parentheses, is that going to shift it up, down, right, or left? Well, outside of the parentheses is either up or down, and it's a plus, so that's going to be up. This equation here, we're starting with a logarithmic function, and then we are shifting it down 6 units, so it wants to know what is my equation going to be. Well, when it's down or up, that means my number is outside of the parentheses, so it's 6 units. 6 is going to be outside. And if I'm shifting down, it's subtraction, so that means my answer choice is going to be letter A. This question here is I'm starting with another logarithmic function, but now I'm going to shift it 2 units to the right, so what's my new equation going to be? Well, when I'm shifting left or right, that means I'm going to have a number inside of the parentheses. So since it's 7 units here, it's going to be inside. And when I'm shifting to the right, that's a minus a number. So my answer choice here is going to be letter B.
Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you learned something new.